Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, and today I am going to be talking about three films starring Bela Lugosi, who is of course best known for having played Dracula in the 1931 Hammer horror film. The first of these films in the order of release and in quality, though to be honest it doesn't have much competition on that front, is the 1939 British film Dark Eyes of London, also known as The Human Monster. It's loosely based on a novel by crime author Edgar Wallace, who also created King Kong, and tells the tale of Scotland Yard's investigation into a macabre and murderous life insurance scam. Second comes the 1941 offering Invisible Ghost, in which a respected pillar of the community finds his home inexplicably becoming the site of a series of violent deaths. These crimes are then investigated by some of the most clueless cops ever to bumble their way onto the cinematic screen. And finally, in 1942's Bowery at Midnight, we experience the tale of a tenement soup kitchen that is secretly the front for a criminal mastermind. Oh, and also there are zombies in it for some reason. I suspect there's a non-zero chance that the reason was we couldn't think of an ending. So let's get one thing out of the way right up front. None of these movies are good. Dark Eyes of London comes closest and was apparently quite successful in Germany, but then so are David Hasselhoff records. All three films are low-budget affairs, either produced or at least distributed by Monogram Pictures, one of Hollywood's Poverty Row studios of the 1930s and 40s. Unfortunately for Lugosi, despite his fame from that 1931 hit film Dracula, he was never able to become a leading actor in the respectable end of the cinema industry. Universal would generally only offer him supporting roles, likely due to his strong Austrian accent. A problem not shared by his fellow horror icon Boris Karloff, who behind his screen name was actually an Englishman named William Pratt. And so Lugosi turned to Monogram for leading, or at least top-billed roles. This kept the bills paid in the short term, but I suspect that appearing in poorly written, cheaply made fare like this did little to help his credibility as an A-list attraction. Lugosi's career would continue a slow and inexorable decline until by the 1950s he was reduced to appearing in Ed Wood's notoriously poor films Bride of the Monster and Plan 9 from Outer Space, though he did not live to see the latter film completed. But in addition to being not terribly good, these three films do share some other more specific characteristics, so let's talk about those. So the first of them is that they all share the motif of having a character who is ostensibly a respected pillar of the community or a philanthropist turn out to be a dastardly criminal, violent murderer, or both. Lugosi plays this character in all three movies. The strong identification between the actor and his role of Dracula meant that he very rarely got to play the good guy. The specific details of the character and their double life vary from film to film, of course. Dark Eyes features a doctor who turns to crime, Invisible Ghost, a man who is not in conscious control of his violent episodes, and Bowery at Midnight. Well, frankly, the whole story in that film is such a mess that I'm not even sure even the writers knew what was going on. But if we ignore some of the script's more nonsensical elements, it appears to be the case of a career criminal assuming the guise of a do-gooder to conceal his activities. I find this repeated conflation of apparent respectability with secret vice and the possible reasons behind it quite interesting. It's entirely possible, of course, that the repeated trope is nothing more than the result of lazy writing. It's a pretty obvious twist, after all. Did it also have a reflect real-world cynicism about the moral character of wealthy industrialists and financiers? The Great Depression was, after all, a very recent experience of the time, while tales of war profiteering in World War II would also have been on people's minds. It is at the very least interesting to think about. The films also all feature bad plots. Now, I'm not just talking about the plot of the movie itself here, though they certainly qualify. I'm talking about the plots and plans of the characters within the films. In Dark Eyes of London, for instance, the villain's scheme requires his victims to all die by the same method, and for them all to be insured by his insurance company, and for them all to have the same charity listed as their beneficiary's policy's beneficiary, sorry. As you might expect, it doesn't take the police all that long to notice the pattern. In Invisible Ghost, meanwhile, the entire plot hinges on a second character not only going to immense lengths to conceal a car accident that killed one person and left another with serious brain injuries, but then also to keep the latter person in their own cottage for years. Even like leaving aside the question of how they would manage that without getting found out, this is really the kind of decision making that's a very good illustration of why. Why did they do this? Now, the film does offer an explanation, but it falls a long way short of plausible, frankly. And finally, we have Barry at Midnight, where the bad guys got schemes within schemes, which would be great if said schemes somehow synergize together, but they don't, and in at least one case, they're actively counterproductive. He set up a soup kitchen, you see, to give him a legitimate reason to spend lots of time in the Bowery, a neighbourhood known for its vagrants and criminals. Fair enough, that makes sense. But then he's also running the soup kitchen under an assumed identity, which means that ostensibly he isn't going to the Bowery at all, some other person is. And surely anyone who knows this respectable cover identity would be very curious about his apparent doppelganger. The whole extra layer of duplicity makes him more likely to get caught, not less. And I haven't even got to that villain's worst decision, which is to employ a drug-addled doctor who is secretly turning dead gangsters into zombies. Because don't forget, this is a movie that suddenly has zombies in it. These undead fiends are the machina by which the movie accomplishes its deus ex, in fact. But while Barry at Midnight is the only one of the three films to swerve into outright monster mash horror movie antics, it's certainly not alone in hewing towards horror as a theme. You might say that the crimes in all of these movies are not just horrible, but also horrorable. Or you might not do that because you might have more shame than me and avoid such silliness, but you're not me. In any case, a thread of horror movie references and allusions and themes runs across all these movies, and I suspect Lugosi's involvement in the movies is connected. He was strongly identified with the genre and likely either got offered these roles because of the themes, or the themes were added when he got offered the roles. Dark Eyes of London is perhaps the most subtle on this front, as it is on most fronts, actually. In the original novel, its villain is a Dr. Judd, whose accomplice is his brother. In the film, he becomes Dr. Orloff, possibly a reference to either Boris Karloff or Count Orlok from Nosferatu, or both. And his accomplice is a lumbering, deformed figure, strongly reminiscent of Igor, the character Lugosi himself had played earlier that year in Son of Frankenstein. As for Invisible Ghost, well, it's got ghost right in the title, and the main character's unconscious belief that he's been haunted certainly plays a significant, albeit arbitrary and nonsensical, role in the plot. Now, ultimately, none of these are anywhere near being good films. Invisible Ghost perhaps offers the most largely unintentional entertainment, thanks to its utterly daft plot and weird script decisions, some which are truly perplexing. But unless you're really in the mood for so bad it's good, you should skip all of these films. Next time, The Little Mermaid. Not the live-action remake that came out recently, but the 1989 animated feature on which that was based. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.